Emma Richardson was only 8 years old when she learned what true terror felt like. She stood in the doorway of her bedroom, her small hands gripping the frame so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Down the hallway, she could hear the sounds that had become sickeningly familiar over the past 6 months. The crash of something breaking. Her mother's voice, pleading. Then the sharp crack that made Emma flinch every single time. Derek was hurting Mama again. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as she pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself invisible. She knew better than to go out there. The last time she had tried to help, Derek had grabbed her by the arm and thrown her back into her room so hard she had hit the dresser. The bruise on her shoulder had taken 2 weeks to fade. Mama had cried and apologized over and over, saying it would get better, that Derek was just stressed, that he loved them. But love was not supposed to sound like this. Emma slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She could hear her mother crying now, begging Derek to stop. The 8-year-old squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down her face. She had tried everything. She had called her grandmother, but Grandma lived 3 states away and told her she must be confused. She had told her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, but when the school called, Mama had lied and said everything was fine. Derek had been so angry that night. The police had come once, 2 months ago, when a neighbor reported the screaming. But Derek was charming when he wanted to be. He had smiled and joked with the officers, and Mama had stood there with her arms crossed, hiding the bruises, saying it was just the television turned up too loud. The police had believed them and left. Nobody would help them. Nobody would save them. Emma was beginning to think nobody ever would. Stories like this one are more common than any of us want to believe. Behind closed doors in quiet neighborhoods, people are suffering while the world goes on around them. If you have ever felt helpless in the face of injustice, or wished someone would step up when it mattered most, you understand the weight of what Emma was carrying. This is a story about what happens when traditional systems fail and when help comes from the most unexpected place. Have you ever witnessed everyday people become heroes when no one else would? Share your thoughts below, because these conversations remind us why we cannot stay silent. Now, let me tell you what happened next. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything changed. Emma sat on the curb outside Rosie's Diner, the small restaurant at the edge of town where her mother worked double shifts on weekends. Sarah had started taking Emma to work with her because leaving her alone with Derek had become too dangerous. Emma did her homework in the back booth, and Rosie, the owner, would bring her free fries and chocolate milk. But today was different. Today, Derek had shown up. Through the diner window, Emma watched as Derek cornered her mother by the coffee station. His face was red, his gestures aggressive. Even though Emma could not hear the words, she knew what was happening. He was angry that Sarah had not come home the night before. She had slept on Rosie's couch instead, too afraid to face him after he had lost his job again. Sarah's hands were shaking as she poured coffee, trying to ignore him. But Derek grabbed her wrist, squeezing so hard that she dropped the pot. It shattered on the floor, hot coffee splashing everywhere. Rosie came running from the kitchen, shouting at Derek to get out. He shoved the 60-year-old woman aside and dragged Sarah toward the door. Emma jumped up, her heart racing. She wanted to run inside to stop him, but her feet felt frozen to the pavement. She watched helplessly as Derek pulled her mother out into the parking lot, his hand twisted in her hair. That was when Emma noticed the motorcycles. There were 5 of them, parked in a row at the far end of the lot. Big, gleaming machines with chrome pipes and leather saddlebags. And standing beside them were the bikers. They wore black leather vests with patches and colors that Emma did not understand, but even at 8 years old, she recognized the symbols. These were Hell's Angels. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind from a phone call months ago. Stay away from those biker types, Emma. They are dangerous people. But as Emma watched Derek slam her mother against his truck, she made a decision that would change everything. Dangerous or not, these men were the only ones here, the only ones who might actually do something. Emma ran across the parking lot, her small legs pumping as fast as they could carry her. She could hear her mother screaming now, could hear the sickening thud of Derek's fist connecting with something solid. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not stop. She ran straight to the biggest biker, a mountain of a man with a grey beard and arms covered in tattoos. He was lighting a cigarette, talking to one of his companions, when Emma crashed into his legs and grabbed onto his vest with both hands. "Please," she sobbed, looking up at him with desperate, terrified eyes. "Please help us. They're beating my mama. He is beating my mama and nobody will stop him." The biker, whose vest read Reaper across the back, looked down at the tiny girl clinging to him. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then his eyes shifted to the parking lot, where Derek had Sarah pinned against the truck, his fist raised. Reaper's expression hardened into something that made Emma shiver, but not from fear, from hope. He dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. Then he looked at his fellow bikers, and without a single word being spoken, they all moved as one. Emma stumbled backward as Reaper strode across the parking lot, his 4 companions flanking him like a wall of leather and muscle. Their boots struck the pavement in unison, a sound like thunder rolling in before a storm. Derek did not even notice them coming. He was too focused on Sarah, too lost in his rage to see the danger approaching, but Sarah saw them. Her eyes widened over Derek's shoulder, and for the first time in months, Emma saw something other than fear in her mother's face. She saw hope. "Hey," Reaper's voice boomed across the parking lot, deep and commanding, "get your hands off her." Derek spun around, his fist still raised. When he saw the 5 bikers bearing down on him, he let go of Sarah and took a step back. But the bravado did not leave his face. Instead, he puffed up his chest, trying to match their intimidation. "This is none of your business," Derek snarled. "This is between me and my woman." "Walk away." Reaper did not walk away. He stepped closer, towering over Derek by at least 4 inches and outweighing him by 50 pounds of muscle. "See, that is where you are wrong. A little girl just begged me for help because you are beating her mother. That makes it my business." One of the other bikers, a lean man with a scarred face and a vest that reads Snake, moved to Sarah's side. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice surprisingly gentle, "you all right? You need medical attention?" Sarah's hand was pressed to her face, blood trickling from her split lip. She shook her head, then nodded, then started to cry. "I just want him to leave," she whispered. "I just want him gone." Derek's face twisted with fury. "You cannot make me do anything. You think you scare me. I will call the cops right now. You are threatening me." "Go ahead," Reaper said, pulling out his own phone. "Call them. I would love to explain to the police why a grown man was beating a woman in a public parking lot in front of her daughter. You think your charm is going to work this time, with 5 witnesses who are not afraid of you?" For the first time, Derek's confidence wavered. He looked at the bikers, then at Sarah, then at the small crowd that had gathered outside the diner. Rosie stood at the door, her own phone out, recording everything. "You have 2 choices," Reaper continued, his voice level but filled with an undercurrent of barely controlled rage. "You can leave right now, get in your truck, and never come near this woman or her daughter again, or we can wait for the police together and you can explain those bruises on her face and arms. Explain them to the cops. Explain them to a judge, your call." Derek's jaw clenched. He looked like he wanted to fight, wanted to assert his dominance the way he always did with Sarah. But these were not people he could intimidate. These were not people who would back down. "This is not over," Derek hissed at Sarah. "You hear me? This is not over. You think you can just leave. You think these bikers are going to protect you forever?" "Yeah," said another biker, a stocky man with a handlebar mustache and a vest reading, "Hammer." "Yeah, we are." Reaper took another step forward, and this time Derek actually retreated. "You have 10 seconds to get in your truck and drive away. If I ever see you near this woman or her kid again, if I even hear that you have driven down her street, we are going to have a very different conversation. Understand?" Derek stared at him for a long moment, hatred burning in his eyes. Then he spat on the ground, shot one last venomous look at Sarah, and climbed into his truck. The engine roared to life and he peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. But Emma knew, even as young as she was, that this was not over. Men like Derek did not just give up. They waited. They planned. They came back when you thought you were safe. Sarah collapsed against Snake's supportive arm, sobbing. Rosie came running over with a first aid kit, fussing over the injuries. And Emma stood frozen in the middle of the parking lot, shaking from head to toe. Reaper knelt down in front of her, making himself smaller, less intimidating. Up close, Emma could see that his eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners like he smiled often. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "You did good. You were very brave." "Is he gone?" Emma whispered. "Is Mama safe now?" Reaper's expression darkened. "For now, but men like that, they do not always stay gone. Your Mama is going to need some real help. Protection, you understand?" Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma. Emma, I am Reaper. That is Snake, Hammer, Crow, and Diesel." He pointed to each of his companions in turn. "We are part of a motorcycle club. You know what that means." "My grandma says you are dangerous." Reaper smiled, a sad sort of smile. "We can be, but only to people who deserve it. People who hurt kids and women, they deserve it. You and your Mama, you do not deserve what he has been doing to you, so here is what is going to happen. We are going to make sure you are both safe. Really safe. You trust me?" Emma looked into his eyes, searching for any sign that he was lying, that he would let them down like everyone else had. But all she saw was steady determination and a fierce protectiveness that reminded her of how her own father had looked at her before he died 3 years ago. "I trust you," Emma said. Within 2 hours, Sarah and Emma's entire world had changed. The Hells Angels did not just offer empty promises and walk away. They acted. Reaper made phone calls. Within 30 minutes, 2 more bikers arrived at Rosie's diner, along with a woman named Jessica who worked at a women's shelter 2 towns over. She had short red hair and kind eyes, and she explained to Sarah that she had a safe place where Derek could never find them. "But my job," Sarah protested weakly, still pressing an ice pack to her swollen face. "My apartment, everything I own is there." "Your life is worth more than things," Jessica said firmly. "And Rosie already told me you will have a job waiting for you whenever you are ready. But first, you need to heal. You need to be somewhere safe while we figure out the legal side of this." Sarah looked at Emma, sitting beside her in the booth, clutching her mother's hand. "What about Emma's school, her friends?" "Mama," Emma said quietly, "I do not have that many friends. And I cannot learn anything when I am scared all the time." Sarah's face crumpled, and she pulled her daughter close. "I am so sorry, baby. I am so sorry I let it get this bad." "You did not let anything happen," Reaper said, sliding into the booth across from them. His massive frame barely fit in the seat. "He did this, not you. You were trying to survive, trying to protect your kid, but you cannot do this alone anymore. Let us help you." Snake appeared at the table with his own phone. "We have got a problem," he said, his scarred face grim. "Derek just posted on social media. He is saying Sarah stole from him, that she is unstable, that he is going to get the cops to bring her back. He is already building a narrative." Sarah went pale. "He is going to make me look like the bad guy. He is going to say I am lying about everything. He always does this. He is smart. He knows how to manipulate people." "Then we need to be smarter," Reaper said. "Rosie, you got that video you took?" Rosie nodded, already uploading it to her computer. Crystal clear footage of him hitting her, time stamped, multiple witnesses. "Good. We are going to file a police report, get a restraining order, and document everything, every bruise, every threat, every lie he tells." Reaper looked at Snake. "Call the lawyers, the ones who help with the domestic violence cases." "Already on it," Snake confirmed. Emma watched in amazement as the bikers moved with military precision, each one taking on a task, coordinating like they had done this before. And as she would learn later, they had. The Hells Angels had a reputation for being dangerous outlaws, and some of that reputation was earned. But what most people did not know was that many chapters also had a strict code: protect those who could not protect themselves. Women and children being abused fell squarely into that category. Over the next 3 hours, a plan came together. Sarah and Emma would go to the shelter that night. Jessica would drive them in her unmarked car, and 2 bikers would follow at a distance to make sure Derek did not tail them. In the morning, they would go to the police station together, file formal charges, and request an emergency restraining order. But Reaper knew, and Snake knew, and all the bikers knew that a piece of paper would not stop Derek. Men who beat women did not respect legal boundaries. They respected power and fear. "We need to send a message," Hammer said, standing outside the diner with the other bikers while Sarah and Emma gathered their belongings inside. "The kind Derek will understand." "What are you thinking?" Diesel asked. He was the youngest of the group, maybe 30, with intense dark eyes and a reputation for creative problem-solving. "I am thinking we pay a visit to his apartment tonight, not to hurt him," Hammer added quickly, seeing Reaper's warning look. "Just to make it clear that he is being watched, that if he takes one step out of line, we will know." Reaper considered this. They had to be careful. The last thing they needed was to give Derek ammunition to claim he was the victim, that he was being harassed by a biker gang. But they also needed to make it absolutely clear that Sarah and Emma were under protection. "No property damage," Reaper said finally. "No threats that can be recorded or used against us. We just show up. Let him see us. Let him understand that he is outnumbered and outmatched. Sometimes presence is enough." Crow, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. He was the oldest of the group, nearly 60, with more gray than black in his beard. "I will make some calls. We can get 20 bikes out here by tonight. A whole convoy just idling outside his building, legal, public, not breaking any laws. Just being present." "Do it," Reaper agreed. As the sun began to set, Emma sat in the back of Jessica's car, her small backpack on her lap containing everything she had managed to grab from the apartment while Snake and Reaper stood guard. It was not much. Some clothes, her favorite stuffed bear, a picture of her dad. Sarah sat beside her, staring out the window with empty eyes. She looked exhausted, defeated, like all the fight had been drained out of her. "Mama," Emma whispered. "Yeah, baby. Are we going to be okay?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took Emma's hand. "I think, maybe for the first time in a long time, we actually might be." Behind them, the rumble of motorcycle engines filled the air. Emma turned to look out the back window and saw them. Not just 5 bikes now, but 15, 20, more arriving by the minute. They formed a protective convoy, surrounding Jessica's car on all sides, and at the front, leading them all, was Reaper. What these bikers were about to do would change everything for Sarah and Emma. But here is the thing about standing up for what is right. It is never as simple as it looks. There are always complications, risks, and moments where you have to decide how far you will go. Derek was not going to accept this quietly, and the bikers knew that protecting this family meant committing to something bigger than just one night of intervention. If you are invested in seeing how this unfolds, make sure you are subscribed, because stories like this, stories about real courage and the complications that come with it, they deserve to be heard. And trust me, what happens next, you will not want to miss. Derek was already drunk by the time the motorcycles arrived. He stood on the 3rd-floor balcony of his apartment building, beer in hand, scrolling through his phone and posting more lies about Sarah. He had spent the afternoon calling her names online, telling anyone who would listen that she was a thief and a liar, that he was the real victim. Then he heard it, the rumble that started as a distant thunder and grew into a deafening roar. Derek walked to the edge of the balcony and looked down at the parking lot. His beer slipped from his hand and shattered on the concrete below. There were at least 30 motorcycles filling the lot, and more coming. They rolled in with their headlights blazing, engines growling like caged beasts. The bikers dismounted but did not approach the building. They just stood there, arms crossed, staring up at Derek's apartment. It was a show of force, a message delivered without a single word spoken. Derek's hands started shaking. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? There is a gang outside my building, Derek said, trying to keep his voice steady. Hell's Angels, like 30 of them, they are threatening me. Are they on your property, sir? Derek looked down. The bikers were in the public parking lot, not on private property. They were not blocking any exits. They were not brandishing weapons or making threats. They were just standing there. They are in the parking lot. Are they threatening you verbally or physically? They do not have to say anything. I know why they are here. My girlfriend, she sent them after me. This is harassment. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sir, if they are in a public parking lot and not threatening you or breaking any laws, there is not much we can do, but I will send an officer to check it out. Derek hung up and hurled his phone across the room. This could not be happening. He was supposed to be in control. He was supposed to be the one making Sarah scared, making her come crawling back. But now there were 30 bikers outside his home, and he was the one who was terrified. 20 minutes later, 2 police cruisers arrived. Derek watched from his window as the officers approached Reaper, who stood at the front of the group like a general commanding his troops. The conversation was calm. Reaper showed the officers his identification, explained that they were a legitimate motorcycle club conducting a peaceful assembly. He mentioned, casually, that they had witnessed a domestic violence incident earlier that day and had helped the victim file a police report. He did not mention that they were here to intimidate Derek. He did not have to. The officers looked up at Derek's apartment, then back at Reaper. One of them, a veteran cop named Officer Martinez, had been on the force for 20 years. He had been to this building before. He had taken statements from neighbors who heard screaming. He had seen Sarah's bruises and heard Derek's excuses. "How long are you planning to be here?" Martinez asked Reaper. "Just wanted to make our presence known. We will be gone soon." Martinez nodded slowly. "Keep it peaceful, no laws broken." "Never planned otherwise, officer." The police left. Derek watched them go with growing fury. They were not going to help him. Nobody was going to help him. The bikers had outmaneuvered him, and there was nothing he could do about it. Except there was. Derek was not stupid. He knew he could not confront 30 bikers, but he also knew they could not watch Sarah 24 hours a day. They had lives, jobs. Eventually, they would let their guard down, and when they did, he would make Sarah pay for this humiliation. Derek stepped back into his apartment and opened his laptop. He started documenting everything, the bikers' presence, the harassment he was experiencing. He took photos from his window, making sure to caption them with phrases like intimidation tactics and gang violence. He was building a case, creating evidence that he was the victim. 2 could play at this game. Meanwhile, at the women's shelter, Sarah and Emma were settling into their small room. It was sparse but clean, with 2 twin beds, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto a garden. Jessica had explained the rules, the security measures, the counseling services available. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. Emma sat beside her, leaning against her mother's shoulder. "I am scared he is going to find us," Sarah whispered. Emma was scared too, but she tried to be brave. "Reaper said they would protect us." "They cannot protect us forever, baby. They have their own lives." As if summoned by the mention of his name, there was a knock at the door. Jessica poked her head in. "Sarah, you have a phone call. It is Reaper." Sarah picked up the phone in the common room, her hands trembling. "Hello? Sarah, it is Reaper. I wanted to let you know we just had a visit to Derek's place. Made sure he understood that you are not alone anymore. He called the cops on us, but we were not breaking any laws." Just standing there, legal and peaceful. "Is he angry?" "Oh, he is furious, which is why I need you to be extra careful. Angry men do stupid things. You do not leave that shelter without an escort. You do not tell anyone where you are, not even people you trust. Understand?" "I understand." "Good. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, we are taking you to the police station. We are going to file charges and get that restraining order. Snake called in a favor with a lawyer friend. She's going to help you pro bono. We are building a case against Derek that he cannot charm his way out of." Sarah felt tears welling up. "Why are you doing all this? You do not even know me." Reaper was quiet for a moment. "My sister was married to a man like Derek. I was younger, did not know how to help her. By the time I figured it out, it was too late. He put her in the hospital, permanent brain damage. So now, when I see a little girl begging for help because someone is beating her mama, I do not walk away. I do what I should have done for my sister." Sarah could not speak. She just held the phone and cried. "You are going to get through this," Reaper said gently. "It is going to be hard and it is going to take time, but you are going to get through it. And Emma is going to grow up knowing that her mama was strong enough to leave, brave enough to fight back. That is the legacy you are building right now. After they hung up, Sarah went back to the room where Emma was already curled up in bed, hugging her stuffed bear. Sarah lay down beside her, wrapping her arms around her daughter. "Mama," Emma murmured sleepily. "Yeah, baby. I am glad I asked the bikers for help." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." But neither of them knew that Derek was already planning his next move, and that the worst was yet to come. The restraining order was granted at 10:30 the next morning. Judge Patricia Holloway read through the police report, viewed the video footage from Rosie's diner, examined the photographs of Sarah's bruises, and signed the order without hesitation. Derek was to stay at least 500 feet away from Sarah and Emma at all times. No contact, direct or indirect. Sarah walked out of the courthouse with the paperwork in her hands, flanked by Reaper and Snake. The morning sun felt warmer than it had in months. For the first time, she felt like maybe the system was actually going to work. That feeling lasted exactly 4 hours. Derek violated the restraining order that same afternoon. He waited until the bikers had taken Sarah back to the shelter, until he was sure she was alone in her room. Then he called from a blocked number. Sarah's phone rang. She did not recognize the number, but she answered anyway, thinking it might be the lawyer. "You think a piece of paper is going to stop me?" Derek's voice was cold, controlled, more dangerous than she had ever heard it. "You think your biker friends are going to be there forever? I know where Emma goes to school. I know where your mother lives. I know every person you care about. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Sarah dropped the phone, her whole body shaking. Jessica came running when she heard Sarah's screams. The police were called. The violation was documented, but Derek had used a burner phone from a location that could not be easily traced. It was his word against Sarah's about what was said, and his lawyer was already arguing that Derek was being framed, that the bikers were coaching Sarah on what to say. The legal system, which had seemed so promising that morning, suddenly felt inadequate again. Reaper got the call an hour later. When he heard what happened, his expression went dark. "This ends now," he said to the gathered bikers at their clubhouse. There were almost 40 of them now, word having spread through the chapter about what was happening. "We have tried to do this the right way, legal, by the book. But Derek just proved that he does not care about restraining orders or consequences. He is going to keep escalating until someone gets hurt." "What are you proposing?" Crow asked carefully. They all knew Reaper well enough to know when he was considering crossing a line. "I am proposing we make it impossible for him to get anywhere near Sarah or Emma. Around-the-clock protection, shifts. Someone is always watching that shelter. Someone is always ready to escort Sarah wherever she needs to go. We did this for Hammer's sister 2 years ago. We can do it again." Diesel spoke up. "That is a big commitment. Could be weeks, months even, until Derek gives up or gets arrested for something else." "Then it is weeks or months," Reaper said flatly. "We do not abandon people halfway through. We do not let men like Derek win. Who is with me?" Every single hand in the room went up. Over the next 2 weeks, the Hells Angels implemented a protection detail that would have impressed a private security firm. They organized schedules, set up communication protocols, and established a system where Sarah and Emma were never alone. 2 bikers were always stationed outside the shelter. When Sarah needed to go to work, they escorted her. When Emma needed to go to a counseling appointment, they drove her. Derek tried twice more to make contact. Once, he showed up at Rosie's diner, but he saw the 3 bikers sitting in the corner booth and left before even getting out of his truck. The second time, he tried to approach Emma's new school, but Hammer was there, leaning against his motorcycle right in front, and Derek drove past without stopping. The bikers documented every violation, every attempt, building a case that even Derek's charm could not overcome. But Derek was getting desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. On a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the initial incident, Derek decided to make his final move. He had been drinking, working himself up into a rage. He grabbed a baseball bat from his closet and drove to the women's shelter. He did not care about the restraining order anymore. He did not care about consequences. All he cared about was making Sarah understand that she belonged to him, that she could not just leave. He pulled into the parking lot at 11:30 at night, his headlights sweeping across the building. That was when he saw them. 6 motorcycles were parked in a semicircle in front of the entrance. 6 bikers sat on the steps, alert and waiting. They had known he would come eventually. Men like Derek always came. Reaper stood up as Derek's truck rolled to a stop. Even in the dim light, Derek could see the bat on the passenger seat, could see the wild look in Derek's eyes. "Last chance," Reaper called out. "You turn around right now, and we call this in to the cops. You get arrested for violating a restraining order, you do some time, and when you get out, you start over somewhere far away from Sarah and Emma. But if you get out of that truck with that bat, if you take one step toward that building, this ends very differently." Derek's hands gripped the steering wheel. He looked at the bat, then at the bikers, then at the building where he knew Sarah was sleeping. Every fiber of his being wanted to charge forward, to fight, to assert his dominance the way he always had. But there were 6 of them, and more would come. He knew that now. The bikers were not going to give up. They were not going to get tired or bored or distracted. They were going to be here, every day, every night, forever if that was what it took. Derek had finally met a force he could not bully, manipulate, or intimidate. For a long moment, the parking lot was silent except for the idle of Derek's truck engine. Then, with a scream of rage that echoed through the night, Derek slammed the truck into reverse and peeled out of the parking lot. Reaper immediately called the police, reporting the violation and the weapon. Snake had captured the entire encounter on his phone camera, clear evidence that Derek had come armed to a protected shelter. This time, when the police found Derek an hour later, still driving around town in a drunken rage, they arrested him. The bat, the violated restraining order, the documented pattern of harassment, it all added up. Derek was held without bail, deemed a danger to Sarah and Emma. At the arraignment 3 days later, Derek's lawyer tried to paint his client as a man driven to desperation by false accusations and gang harassment. But the evidence was overwhelming. The video from Rosie's diner, the medical reports documenting Sarah's injuries, the recorded violations of the restraining order, the testimony of multiple witnesses. The judge, the same Patricia Holloway who had granted the restraining order, was not swayed by the defense's arguments. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, looking at Derek with cold contempt, "you have demonstrated through your repeated actions that you are a threat to the safety and well-being of Sarah Richardson and her daughter. You have violated a court order multiple times. You have made threats. You showed up at a women's shelter with a weapon. The evidence against you is substantial, and your behavior shows no remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing." Derek started to protest, but his lawyer put a hand on his arm. "I am remanding you to custody pending trial on charges of domestic violence, stalking, harassment, and violation of a protective order. Your bail is denied. Court is adjourned." As Derek was led away in handcuffs, screaming about injustice and conspiracy, Sarah sat in the gallery with Emma on one side and Reaper on the other. She watched the man who had terrorized her for 6 months finally face real consequences, and for the first time in so long, she felt like she could breathe. The trial took place 6 weeks later. Sarah was terrified to testify, but when she walked into the courtroom and saw the gallery filled with bikers, their presence a silent show of support, she found her courage. She told the truth, all of it. The first time Derek hit her, the escalating violence, the isolation, the fear. Emma's teacher testified about the change in Emma's behavior, the signs of trauma. Rosie testified about what she had witnessed in the diner parking lot. The police officers who had responded to calls at Derek's apartment testified about what they had seen. Derek's lawyer tried to discredit everyone, suggesting that Sarah was being coached, that the bikers had intimidated witnesses, that his client was the real victim of a conspiracy. But the jury saw through it. They deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Derek was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with additional requirements for anger management and domestic violence counseling upon release. A permanent restraining order was issued, protecting Sarah and Emma indefinitely. When the verdict was read, Sarah collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief. Emma hugged her mother tightly, and the bikers, stoic and quiet throughout the trial, allowed themselves small smiles of satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, wanting to know about the Hells Angels' involvement. Reaper gave a brief statement. "We saw someone who needed help, and we helped. That is what people should do. The system worked this time, but it only worked because Sarah was brave enough to stand up, and because people were willing to stand with her. We hope this sends a message that domestic violence will not be tolerated and that victims are not alone." Over the following months, life slowly returned to a new normal for Sarah and Emma. Sarah got her own apartment, a small 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood. The bikers helped her move, carrying boxes and furniture like it was the most natural thing in the world. Emma started at a new school where she did not have to worry about Derek showing up. The nightmares did not stop immediately. Trauma does not disappear the moment the threat is removed. Both Sarah and Emma attended counseling, working through the fear and pain that Derek had inflicted. But they were healing. Slowly, steadily healing. The bikers did not just disappear from their lives. Reaper checked in every week, making sure they had everything they needed. Hammer taught Emma how to ride a bicycle, something her father had promised to do before he died. Snake, who turned out to be surprisingly good with computers, helped Sarah set up better security measures on her phone and social media. They had become family. On Emma's 9th birthday, 3 months after the trial, Sarah threw a small party in their new apartment. She invited Rosie, Jessica from the shelter, Emma's new friends from school, and the bikers who had saved their lives. Emma wore a new dress that Reaper had bought her, blue with little stars on it. She blew out her candles surrounded by people who loved her, people who had proven that good still existed in the world. Later, as the party wound down, Emma found Reaper standing on the small balcony, looking out at the sunset. "Reaper," she said quietly. He turned and smiled at her. "Hey, birthday girl, you having a good day?" "The best day," Emma confirmed. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind for months. "Why did you help us? Really?" Reaper knelt down so he was eye level with her, just like he had in that parking lot all those months ago. "Because a very brave little girl asked me to, and because everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home with their own family. You and your mama, you deserved better than what Derek was giving you. Sometimes when the world is not fair, you have to step up and try to balance the scales." Emma threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my mama." Reaper hugged her back, his eyes getting misty despite himself. "You saved your mama, kiddo. You were the brave one. We just helped finish what you started." A year after that terrifying day in the parking lot, Sarah stood in front of a small community center, cutting a ribbon. The sign above the door read, "Emma's Hope House, a safe place for families in crisis." The idea had come to her 6 months earlier during a counseling session. She had been talking about how isolating and terrifying it had been to try to escape Derek, how many times she had felt completely alone. And she had thought, what if there was a place that could connect victims with resources immediately? What if there were networks of people ready to help at a moment's notice? What if there were more people like the Hells Angels, ready to step up when it mattered? Sarah had applied for grants, held fundraisers, and recruited volunteers. Rosie had donated the old community center building that had sat empty for years. Jessica had helped design programs and protocols. And the Hells Angels had committed to being part of the volunteer protection network, offering to escort victims who needed safe transportation, to provide presence at court hearings, to be the show of force that sometimes made all the difference. Emma's Hope House offered crisis counseling, legal aid connections, temporary housing assistance, and most importantly, a community of people who refused to look the other way when someone needed help. At the ribbon cutting, Sarah gave a speech to the small crowd gathered. Emma stood beside her, now 9 years old, taller and more confident than she had been a year ago. "A year ago, my daughter and I were trapped in a nightmare," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. We had tried everything. I had called police. I had reached out to family. I had hoped that things would just get better on their own, but abuse does not get better on its own. It escalates, and we were running out of time. She looked at Emma, who smiled up at her encouragingly. Then my incredibly brave daughter did something I had been too afraid to do. She asked for help. Not from the police, not from the authorities who had failed us before, but from 5 bikers standing in a parking lot. And those bikers, they did not hesitate. They did not question whether we were worth it. They just acted. Reaper stood in the crowd with his fellow bikers, all of them wearing their vests, their presence a reminder of that day. Emma's Hope House exists because I learned that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the people who save you are not the ones in uniforms or official positions. Sometimes they are just ordinary people who refuse to stand by when someone is suffering. This center is going to be that for people in our community. A place where you can come when you have run out of options, where you will be connected with people who will actually help, where you will never have to face your nightmare alone. The crowd applauded. Emma pulled the scissors from her mother's hand and cut the ribbon herself, a symbolic gesture that this place, named after her, represented the power of children to change their own circumstances when they found the courage to speak up. Inside, the center was modest but welcoming. There were comfortable chairs, a children's play area, offices for counselors and legal advocates, and a hotline that would be staffed 24 hours a day. On the wall was a photograph of Emma from that day in the parking lot, talking to Reaper, a reminder of where this had all started. As the event wound down and people filtered out, Reaper approached Sarah. "You did good," he said simply. "This is going to help a lot of people." "I could not have done any of this without you," Sarah replied. "You gave me my life back." "You gave Emma her childhood back." Reaper shook his head. "We just cleared the path. You are the one who walked it. You are the one who chose to turn your pain into something that helps others. That takes a different kind of courage." Emma tugged on Reaper's vest. "Are you still going to come visit us, even though Derek is in jail and we are safe now?" Reaper grinned and ruffled her hair. "Are you kidding? I am stuck with you too now. Family does not just walk away when the crisis is over." And he meant it. The bikers had become a permanent fixture in Sarah and Emma's lives. They showed up for birthdays and holidays. They taught Emma how to stand up for herself, how to be strong without being violent, how to recognize danger before it escalated. They showed Sarah that not all men were like Derek, that there were good people in the world who would fight for what was right. Emma grew up knowing that when she had been at her most afraid and vulnerable, she had found the courage to ask for help. And that courage had changed everything. It had saved her mother. It had led to justice. And now it was creating a legacy that would help countless others. She was 9 years old, and she had already learned one of life's most important lessons: you are never as alone as you think you are. Sometimes, the heroes you need are just waiting to be asked. This is what happens when ordinary people refuse to stand by and do nothing. The bikers in this story were not looking for glory or recognition. They simply saw a terrified little girl who needed help, and they showed up. They stayed, they fought, and they did not walk away until Sarah and Emma were truly safe. That is the kind of world we can all help build, one where we pay attention to the suffering around us and choose to act instead of looking away. If this story moved you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Have you ever been helped by an unexpected hero, or maybe you were that hero for someone else? Have you witnessed everyday people doing extraordinary things when it mattered most? Share your story below, because these conversations matter. They remind us that courage comes in all forms, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect. And if you want more stories about ordinary people standing up against injustice, about communities coming together to protect the vulnerable, hit that subscribe button. There are so many more stories to tell, stories that need to be heard, stories that remind us why we cannot afford to stay silent when someone needs help. I am grateful you are here to listen to them, to be part of this community that believes in the power of human goodness. Until next time, remember, Heroes come in all forms. Sometimes they wear badges, sometimes they wear business suits, and sometimes they wear leather vests and ride motorcycles. What matters is not what they look like, but that they showed up when it counted. Stay strong, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of asking for help when you need it most.